Hello guys, and welcome back to another cold episode. On today's episode, we are back with some more Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links action, and today, I've got a spicy deck for you. As you can tell by the title and the thumbnail, we are playing pure Elementsabers, with Elemental Lords as our boss monster instead of Invoked, right? Why use Purgatrio when you can use the better Fire type with Pyro Rex, the Elemental Lord, right? Now let's quickly talk about the Elemental Lords and why we want to use them. First and foremost, they're kind of difficult to get out. You have to special summon them from your hand by having exactly 5 Wind type and 5 Fire type respectively in the graveyard. Now that's not as hard with Elementsabers since they can all change their attribute in the graveyard. So it's not terribly hard. You just get 5 Elementsabers into the graveyard, and then all of a sudden you can activate and summon your Elemental Lords, right? However, the big thing that you want with these cards is when this card is special summoned for Elemental Wind Rose, which is the Wind type, you destroy all spell and trap cards your opponent controls. All of them. Field spell, set back row, everything destroyed, non-targeting, wipe them. Right? And you can only use the effect once per turn, and then if this card leaves the field, skip the battle phase of your next turn. That is detrimental, however, it's still a 2800 beater that gets boosted by your Palace of the Elemental Lords as well, plus it is a back row wipe, so Windrow's pretty good. Also, we have Pyro Rex, the Elemental Lord. This one I actually did end up summoning a little bit more because its effect is you can target a monster your opponent controls and destroy it. And if you do, both players take half the damage, or half the attack damage. Take damage equal to half the original attack of the destroyed monster. There we go. Jeez, I'm crow. I couldn't say it. So, that's really good against a lot of different decks, a lot of different cards and stuff like that, right? The biggest problem that this deck has is probably Cocytus. However, with that being said, you do get boosted up above 2900 on your Elemental Lords, and even occasionally with your Molehiu with your Palace of the Elemental Lords. So it's not that big a deal, but it can be a little bit annoying, right? Now, we're going to talk about the next key card in this deck, which is Palace of the Elemental Lords, and the reason why it is run at 3 is because it's a field spell card that basically says, boost up all your monsters by 200 for each different attribute in your graveyard, 200 attack and defense, which is really useful. And once per turn, you can search an Elementsaber monster from your deck to your hand. You skip the next battle phase, even if this card leaves the field, but you still get a search, which is really useful. So it's a search and a boost. Really good. And it can boost for quite a lot, since we're running many different attributes here, right? And they can all change their attributes at will, right? So if you have 3 Molehiu, you can actually have 2 different types in your graveyard, right? Then, once per turn, if an Elementsaber monster in your hand or field would be sent to send a card from the hand to the graveyard, you can send it from the deck instead. So basically what that means is all of these all these Elementsaber effects that send a monster from the hand to the graveyard. See, it says send one Elementsaber monster from the hand to the graveyard. You can instead send it from the deck, which is a lot more useful because not always are you going to have an Elementsaber in the hand. Now, I'm sure you all know what Molehiu does. You send a card, you flip face down. Pretty understandable. I'm sure a lot of you know what Lapula does. It's a spell or trap negate. Quick effect, you send a card, you negate a spell or trap card. That's what it does, right? But I'm sure not a lot of you know Nalu, Malo, Aina, I think is how you say that. Aina, and Makani, right? These cards are actually extremely useful in this deck. While they're not great in Invoked, except for Malu maybe, and Nalu for just their attribute. In this deck in particular, they're really good. Malu, what it does is you send 2 Elementsabers to the graveyard, which is great for getting out your elemental lords, right? Nalu, what it does is you can send one to the graveyard to grab up and special summon, to add an Elementsaber from the graveyard to the hand, or an elemental lord as well. So if your elemental lord does happen to get sent to the graveyard, you can grab it back up and set it back, right? Pretty easily. Then we have Elementsaber Aina, which you send a card in order to special summon either a properly summoned elemental lord or an Elementsaber other than Aina. So it's another special summon to get more cards on to the field. You will oftentimes end up with like 3 cards on the field just because of how much protection this has with the spell negate and with Mole Hue. Just, it's super safe. You basically don't ever run into like monsters that are going to beat over too easily and stuff like that. So spell negate, monster flip face down, it's pretty great. Then we have Makani, I hope I said that right, which send one to add an Elementsaber or an elemental lord from your deck to your hand. So this is another search card. We're only running 1 of these as well as 1 Nalu, because while adding things from the graveyard to the hand is nice, it's not too necessary. Nalu's basically just there to be a water type and to get it into the grave, basically. And Makani is a little bit more useful. That's something that you can summon. But again, most of the time you're actually not even going to be summoning your elemental lords. Most of the time you're going to be focusing on Mole Hue and Lapula. Lapula to negate back row, Mole Hue to flip monsters into defense position and then swing in, right? Now, we're running probably the best trap in the game as well with Treacherous Trap Hole. There's a reason it's limited to 2. If you control no trap cards in your graveyard, destroy 2 monsters. Pretty freaking good. Really useful. You could change that out for any tech cards, really. Floodgates, Paleozoics, what have you, right? Any sort of trap card, any sort of tech card, go for it. Then we are also running Elemental Training at 2 as well. What this does is your opponent cannot target Palace of the Elemental Lords you control with card effects. Also, it cannot be destroyed by card effects while this card is face up. So it is added protection for your Palace of the Elemental Lords, which is really useful because this card is your lifeblood. If you don't have it, you kinda can't play the deck. Kinda. It's still really good, but you definitely want to focus on this. Then, once per turn, you contribute a monster to special summon an Elementsaber monster from your deck with a different original attribute than that monster, right? So you contribute a Lapula to summon up a Mole Hue. You could tribute a Malo to summon up an Aina. You could tribute a Makani to summon up a Mole Hue, right? Whatever it may be, tribute one to summon a different one, right? Also, you could send this face-up card from the field to the graveyard to discard your entire hand to add an Element Lord monster from your graveyard to your hand, equal to the number of cards discarded, right? So, it's good, but not great, right? And the reason I'm running a 21 card deck is just because, like, having the 2 Ainas is really good. Having the 2 Malos is really good. I can't really get rid of any of these Elemental Lords, and I did want to run double Treacherous. So that's basically it. Extra deck, don't worry about it. You're not using it. And as for the skill, we are running Restart, which basically is just extra insurance that you can get a hand that is playable, right? Because the biggest thing is, like, you don't really care about, like, drawing more cards or hitting harder or anything like that. You just want to be able to control the duel. That is what this deck is about, is controlling the duel with Mole Hue and Lapula. So let's hop into some replays and show you how it's done. Alright guys, so here we are up against Arcana for our first match, and we get to go first. So here we go. A trick up his sleeve, so he's playing Dark Magicians, we know that. We're going to set the Treacherous and the Elemental Training, as well as play the Molehiu. Then we are going to tribute off the Molehiu using our Elemental Training to grab up the Lapula so that we can negate an effect. So if he were to have activated a Dark Magical Circle, we would have negated it, preventing his play, right? Now we draw into a Molehiu. We're going to let the Magician Navigation go through because it's not going to banish anything, and we have a set Treacherous Trap Hole, so we can just pop the 2 cards. Boom, swing in, destroying the Magician's Rod, and then we are going to go for a Malo and swing in, and he immediately surrenders, realizing he can't do anything. We still had a negate with our Lapula, so even if he were to have something else, say that was a Dark Magical Circle that he grabbed, still can negate with a Lapula. So that's why we didn't use it. Really good. Let's hop into the next duel. Alright, so here we are up against Jesse Anderson, and this time we get to go second. We're facing off against Grit, which most likely means it is Lunalight. So there we see the Neos Fusion, so we know that it is Lunalight as well. Lunalight, Yellow Martin is sent to the grave to grab up the Lunalight Fusion, and then they set a card. So we actually have a really good hand here. We activate Palace of the Elemental Lords, and then we grab up, or reset Molehiu and Treacherous Trap Hole. He's going to activate, summon up the Bunny and the Yellow Martin. We're going to pop both of them with the Treacherous Trap Hole. He's going to grab up the Lunalight Fusion once again. The reason we wanted to destroy these cards rather than try and go for the Neos or something else that he summons is because this card can destroy spell or trap cards that we control up to the number of Lunalight cards that he had. So he had 2, he could have popped both of our cards, which would be really bad. So we're just going to pop them immediately. He's going to go for the Lunalight Fusion, goes for the Lunalight Cat Dancer. He didn't send a Crimson Fox, which means that we are safe in attack position. He's going to once again summon up the Lunalight White Rabbit, but its effects are negated. We are then going to activate Elementsaber Molehiu on the response of the attack. Now we should have done it as soon as the battle phase started. Flip down the Lunalight Cat Dancer because that would have prevented this extra 100 damage that we got. Doesn't really matter all that much, but we did take 100 damage because of that. And then because of the effect of Lunalight Cat Dancer, the first time that we are attacked, we do not get destroyed, which means Elemental Hero Brave Neos doesn't destroy us, right? Then we are going to activate our Aina in order to send in a Nalu in order to summon up the Malo. And then Malo is going to send 2 to the graveyard, and then we're just going to sit, right? Not going to swing in, because I think we had to skip the battle phase. So, as soon as the Lunalight Cat Dancer flips back up, we're going to flip it back down with the Molehiu. Now, for some reason, he didn't go for the Molehiu here. I don't know why. He definitely should have instead of the Malo. But for some reason, he decided to take out the Malo instead. But now we have 5 in the graveyard, 5 Elementsabers. So we're going to switch them all to fire in order to summon up our Pyro Rex Elemental Lord. We're going to pop the Cat Dancer. He's going to activate World Legacy Clash. We're going to swing in for 2100. And then all of our guys will go back to their original attribute, boosting us back up, right? Then we're going to once again activate Molehiu. Flip him back face down. Boom. Done and done. And then we're going to switch some of the graveyard attributes. Swing in. Then we are going to once again activate the Elemental Training in order to tribute off the Aina to summon up a Molehiu for 3100 attack. Swing in for lethal. Real good. Let's hop into the next duel. Alright, so here we are up against Maximillion Pegasus, and this time we get to go first once again, which means we get a pretty good setup. Honestly, this is a very much so going first deck. You start with a Molehiu and a Palace of the Elemental Lords, you're in a pretty good state. Now, I didn't want to do the search because I didn't want to skip our battle phase, so instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to send or use Elementsaber Makani's effect in order to search up the Molehiu. Plus, we have a Treacherous Trap Hole, so I'm not too worried. He Cosmic Cyclones it, which is real sad. He's then going to activate Gateway Gateway to Chaos in order to search up his Blackluster Soldier. We're going to then activate Aina in order to summon up the Molehiu from the graveyard. And then we are going to activate Machina in order to grab up the Lapula. We're then going to swing in. He has a Kiteroid. We're going to deal that 1300 damage, but then he's going to negate the other 2 attacks, or negate the damage at least. He activates Master of Rites. We knew that that was coming since he was playing Maximillion Pegasus with a Ritual deck. He's going to grab up his Ritual spell, Super Soldier Synthesis, send the Evening Knight, send the Beginning Knight, in order to summon up Black Luster Soldier. We're going to immediately flip it down with Molehiu. Molehiu, flip down, say no, no, none of that. Gateway to Chaos is going to grab up the Super Soldier Synthesis once again. Then he's going to banish 2 in order to summon up a Chaos Sorcerer. This is a really good card in this deck because you're playing a lot of lights and darks, and it can just banish 2 of them in order to summon up and then banish a card. So, really good. Evening Night and Beginning Night are going, or Evening Twilight Night and Beginning Night are both going to activate in order to grab up the Black Luster Soldier and the Super Soldier Synthesis. Chaos Sorcerer is then going to banish our Molehiu, so the 2 banished cards are a Treacherous Trap Hole and a Molehiu, keep that in mind. Machina is going to activate, send, search up our Pyro Rex once again. We still don't have quite enough in the graveyard, but I did want it there just in case. We're going to switch the Lapula to Divine just to boost up a little bit more, and then we're going to swing in and destroy the 2 cards. Super Soldier Synthesis is then going to activate in order to summon up, once again, the Black Luster Soldier, but this time we have even more for it with the Treacherous Trap Hole, allowing us to get 5 Elementsabers into the graveyard for our Pyro Rex next turn, if not 6, I believe. But it didn't matter. He DC'd. I'm pretty sure that was basically just a surrender. But there we go. We win. Let me hop into the deck review once again. One second. Alright, so I actually did pretty well with this deck. It was very fun to play. I really enjoyed just controlling the Duel. So if you really enjoy control decks, things like Dark Lords, things like, I guess, no, not really Dark Magicians, but heroes or any sort of like back row heavy deck, right? Where you're more so focused on controlling the Duel and kind of forcing out your, like, kind of stopping what your opponent is doing, right? Then you'll love this deck. It's super fun. If you like Dark Lords, I think you'll like Elementsabers, just pure Elementsabers. Because honestly, it's like the amount of frustration that you see on your just through your opponent's plays is kind of funny. They're just like, man, I can't do anything because Molehiu just consistently flips them down. You have so many resources just to flip them down to cause them to not play. And then you have Pyro Rex and Windrose that both, you know, when summoned can do some pretty good damage, right? Plus you get boosted up to a potential 3100 with your Palace of the Elemental Lords. You've got Treacherous Trap Hole, which is so good. Any deck that can actually run Treacherous, it is super fun and super good. I guess not super good, but pretty good, right? And honestly, it's a pretty good anti-meta deck, right? A lot of the decks focus on, you know, either they get stopped by a Lapula because you negate one of their card effects, or you can stop them with the Molehiu by flipping them face down. The only thing that I would really see having an issue is, or this deck having an issue against, is something like Dark Lords, but most of the other decks it's pretty fine, especially if you get to go first, and especially if you start out with a Palace of the Elemental Lords. So there's that. I thought about playing it with the skill Spell Specialist, but realistically, you don't really want to run many other spells. You just want this Palace of the Elemental Lords. And then I thought about running Balance, but then again, kind of a similar issue came up where it was like, well, then I'd have to run more spells. I'd have to run more trap cards as well. And potentially make my deck a little bit bigger. So I didn't really want that. But overall, I really did enjoy this deck. And honestly, in terms of Elemental Lords, like, yeah, you could run some of the other ones, like... Oh, hold on. Where is it? You could run the this guy, the dark one, or you could run the earth one, but neither one of them have great effects. I mean, this one is add a monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck to your hand. That's it. Like, it's not great. And then this one is, you can target a monster in either player's graveyard to special summon that target to your side of the field, which is good. If you want to play it, go ahead. You could grab up something like maybe a Purgatrio, you could grab up a Dark Magician, you could grab up a, you know, a myriad of things that are pretty good. But ultimately, I didn't want more Elemental Lords because they're kind of just bricky in general, right? If you have both Elemental Lords in your hand, you just brick. Like, that's it. You can't really do a whole lot there. So, that's kind of why I only ran the 2. I didn't want to end up bricking. And I figured Pyrorex destroying a card and Windrose destroying back row, pretty good, right? Monster destruction, back row destruction. That's why I went with that. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. That is going to be it. If you guys did indeed enjoy, a like is very much so appreciated. And if you want to check out more content like this, as well as more Duel Links action, just be sure to subscribe. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye.